Hey, so tonight, we're going to take a very slow, very sleepy look at something no one ever gets excited about: food. But not just any food, medieval food. The kind of food that was mostly cold, mostly gray, and mostly terrible. Because, yes, food really did suck in medieval times. And by the end of this quiet little journey, you'll be very glad you weren't born in the 1300s. We're talking thin broth, gritty bread, spoiled meat, and rules so strict even peas soup felt like a luxury. You'll see what people ate, how they cooked, and why dinner in a medieval village could be the saddest part of the day. If you're enjoying these calm, boring corners of forgotten history, I'd love if you hit subscribe and drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Let's drift back, slowly, to medieval Europe. Asterisk, you wake up to the sound of a rooster. Not your alarm clock, not a phone. Just the shrill cry of a bird that's been doing this job for centuries. The bed beneath you is nothing more than straw stuffed into a cloth sack. It smells faintly of damp earth and old hay. The air is cold. You don't have glass windows, just wooden shutters with cracks that let in the chill morning wind. You pull on your tunic, rough wool that scratches your skin, and step onto the dirt floor. Your boots are hard and stiff. There is no bathroom, just a bucket outside behind the animals. You live in a small village, a few wooden homes, a stone church, and a muddy path that runs through the middle. You're not rich. Most people aren't. You're just someone trying to get through the day. And like everyone else, you're hungry. Not I skipped breakfast hungry, but the kind of hunger that's always with you. Quiet, dull, and heavy. Your first meal is whatever's left from yesterday. Maybe a piece of dark bread that's already turning hard. Bread made from barley or rye, never white. That's for rich people. Your bread is full of little bits. Some of them are seeds, some are not. It's coarse. It breaks your teeth if you're not careful. You dip it in water to soften it. If you're lucky, there's a little pot of thin broth, mostly hot water, with some cabbage or onion floating in it. No salt. Spices are too expensive. You sit on a stool beside the fire. Smoke curls upward from the hearth, not through a chimney, just through a hole in the roof. Your eyes sting a little. It's warm here, and that's rare. You eat slowly, chewing the bread as best you can. It fills your stomach, but not in a happy way. Just enough to stop the ache. You wonder what lunch will be. Maybe nothing. Maybe the same thing again. People today don't often realize why food sucked in medieval times. It wasn't just bad taste. It was the worry, the fear, the waiting. You never knew if there would be enough to eat next week or even tomorrow. No refrigerators, no freezers, just a cellar full of hope and jars. If you had jars, outside, the world is gray, the sky is low. A few chickens peck at the ground. Your neighbor is already chopping wood. His axe makes a dull sound against the log. You nod at him. He nods back. You pass by the church and smell the same old stew coming from the priest's quarters. Always stew, always something boiling. It's how they stretched the little they had. You think about meat, real meat. Maybe once a week, if someone traps a rabbit or slaughters a chicken. But even then, it's not what you think. No juicy cuts, just bits of bone and fat, mostly boiled to soften it. Roasting wastes fat and firewood. And firewood is hard to find. Your friend once said he had pig's feet last Sunday. You were jealous. That's how it is. You dream of feet, tails, and guts because they're better than nothing, and nothing is common. The children chase each other in the mud. One of them carries a piece of old turnip. He licks it like candy. You remember when you did that too. The taste is sharp, not sweet, but it's something at midday you help in. The fields, pulling weeds, cutting grass, turning the soil. Your back aches, your hands are stiff. You keep thinking about dinner, the big meal of the day. Maybe tonight there'll be porridge, thick, warm, and plain, made from oats or millet. Maybe a bit of dried apple if someone has a tree. You hope there's no sugar, not here. Maybe in a castle far away. But in your village, sweet things don't exist. Your mouth only knows salt, and not much of that. Your teeth are already going bad. Even though you've never tasted cake, people sometimes laugh when they hear the phrase, "Why food sucked in medieval times." But for those who lived it, it wasn't funny. It was just daily life. A life full of chewing and waiting. A life where food didn't bring joy. It just filled the space where pain used to be. As the sun lowers, you return to your home. The hearth glows again. Someone's boiling water. A neighbor trades you half a carrot for a handful of dried beans. You nod, say thank you, and tuck the carrot into your apron like treasure. You're tired, your legs hurt, but you have something for the pot. That's enough. Night comes quickly. The room is dark. You lie back on your straw bed. Your stomach doesn't growl tonight, but it doesn't smile either. It just sits there, quiet, like you dot, and tomorrow you'll do it all again. You wake before the sun. The sky is still dark, and the cold feels even deeper than yesterday. The fire in the hearth has gone out, and your breath makes a small white cloud in the air. You rub your hands together, trying to bring some feeling back into your fingers. Your feet are already sore, even though you haven't walked a step yet. Another day is beginning, and you already feel tired. You step outside to gather wood. The ground is hard with frost, and the grass crunches under your shoes. Your hands sting from the cold as you pick up small branches. Big logs are saved for special days. Most of the time, you just burn sticks and dry grass. You carry them back, light a small flame, and wait for it to grow. Breakfast is the same as always. Bread, cold, tough. You soak it in a bit of warm water to soften it. There's a leftover scrap of dried onion from yesterday's broth. You add it to the cup like it's something special. It smells strong, but it helps hide the flavor of the stale bread. You chew slowly. You try not to think about how many more days you'll eat this exact meal. There's no milk. The cow hasn't given any in weeks. The goats are thin too. You hear one bleating from the shed. She's hungry as well. Everyone is Dot. Your mother sits near the fire, stitching a torn tunic. Her fingers are rough and red. She winces as the needle pricks her skin. A small drop of blood appears, but she wipes it away without a word. She glances at you. "Go help the baker," she says softly. "He needs hands." You nod and walk to the edge of the village. The bakery isn't what you imagine when you think of a bakery. It's just a stone oven behind a wooden wall, filled with smoke and ash. The baker is already sweating, even in the cold morning. He hands you a sack of flour, or what's left of it, mixed with bits of husk, dirt, and sometimes even crushed pebbles. It's not on purpose. It's just how the mill grinds the grain. You knead the dough for hours. It sticks to your fingers and smells sour. Not because it's spoiled, because that's the only way to make it rise. Wild yeast caught from the air. There's no sugar, no butter, no soft white flour. Just rough, dark loaves that feel more like stone than bread, but it's food. It fills the stomach. People will come for it. They always do. As you work, you listen to the baker. He talks about his cousin who moved to the town. Says they have chickens that lay almost every day. You smile. It sounds like a dream. A soft-boiled egg with salt. You close your eyes and try to imagine the taste. Then you open them again and go back to kneading Dot. By midday, your arms ache. The bread goes into the oven, and the fire roars for a moment. You watch the flames dance. It's beautiful. For a few minutes, you forget the cold. You return home with a small loaf as payment. Your mother is pleased. She slices it carefully, giving each person an even piece. There's a pot of stew on the fire, mostly cabbage, again. A little bit of barley, no meat today. There was none to be found. Still, you eat slowly, carefully. You chew each bite and swallow with warm tea made from dried herbs. It's bitter, but it helps. You feel a little full. That's rare. You hold on to the feeling. In the evening, you sit near the fire and listen to your grandfather. He talks about the old days. He says food was even worse back then. He remembers chewing on bones, hoping to find a bit of fat. He laughs a little when he says it. Not because it was funny, but because there's nothing else to do. That's the thing about why food sucked in medieval times. Was the life around it, the endless hunger, the waiting, the not knowing. Would there be enough this winter? Would the crops survive the frost? Would the chickens lay? Would the goat live? You stare into the fire, listening to it crackle. Your stomach feels quiet, not full, just quiet. That's enough. Later, in bed, you lie under a wool blanket that's rough but warm. The straw mattress creaks as you shift. Your fingers still smell like flour and smoke. You breathe deeply, thinking of tomorrow. It will be the same, another day of digging, baking, boiling, chewing, dreaming of fruit and settling for broth. People today might laugh at the idea of porridge for dinner, or stew without meat, but you know the truth. You've lived it, you've tasted it, and that's exactly why food sucked in medieval times. Asterisk, you wake up in the middle of the night. Your stomach is turning, not from eating too much, but from eating too little. Again, you curl into yourself, wrapping your arms around your middle, trying to press the ache away. Outside, the wind is howling, and the wooden walls creak with every gust. You pull the blanket up over your ears. It's thin, and your feet are cold. You try to go back to sleep, but your thoughts keep drifting toward food. You remember a dream. In it, there were apples, big, red, and sweet. They were sliced on a wooden table, and you were allowed to eat as many as you wanted. Then you woke up, and the taste left your mouth just like that. In the morning, there is no breakfast waiting for you. There's only a pot of boiled water and a bit of yesterday's porridge stuck to the sides of the pan. You scrape it with your spoon, trying to gather enough for a few bites. It's cold, and it tastes like metal, but it's better than nothing. You go outside to feed the chickens, but there are only 3 now. The rest were taken by wolves or hunger. You're not sure which. The remaining ones look thin, tired, like they've given up. You check the nesting box. Nothing. Not even a broken shell. Back in the kitchen, your mother is kneading dough. She doesn't speak much these days. She just works. Her hands move without thinking. The dough is gray, stiff, and rough. You ask what kind of flour she used. Leftovers, she says. A mix of barley, oats, and something else she couldn't name. You stir the pot. Today's stew is made from wild greens, some turnip skins, and a bit of lard. There's no meat. There's rarely meat. But no one complains. Complaining won't change what's in the pot. Your brother brings back a squirrel from the woods. He's proud. It's small, but he says it will help. You skin it together behind the house. You try not to gag from the smell. The meat is tough, and there's not much of it. But it goes into the pot anyway. Everything goes into the pot. Even the tail. At lunch, everyone gets one bowl. No more. You sip it slowly, even though it's more water than stew. The squirrel meat floats near the top, a gray strip curled like paper. You chew it carefully, thankful for something different, even if it's strange. After the meal, you help gather herbs. There's a woman who knows which ones are safe to eat. She points to one with a bitter smell and says it helps with the stomach. Another, she says, is good for wounds. You nod and collect what you can. You pass by the manor on the hill. The smell of roasted meat drifts through the trees. Real meat, not squirrel, not old pig fat. Something rich and warm. You stand there for a moment, breathing it in. You imagine what it must be like inside. A fire, a long table, plates filled with food you can't name, and laughter. You turn away before anyone sees you watching. That night, your neighbor invites you over. They've found some mushrooms in the woods, boiled them with onion and garlic. It smells good. You take a small spoonful and taste it. It's better than anything you've had all week. You smile. For a few minutes, you forget the ache. Then the pot is empty and it's time to go. On the way home, you think about why food sucked in medieval times. It wasn't just the ingredients, it was the sameness, the endless repetition. Bread, stew, porridge, stew, bread, porridge. The same flavors, the same textures, every day. No spices, no sweetness, no color, just gray food on gray days in gray bowls. You lie down in your bed. The straw pokes your back, but you're used to it now. You close your eyes and think of apples again, sweet ones, crisp and juicy. You've only tasted one in your life, years ago. A traveling merchant gave you a slice. You remember every second. The way the juice ran down your chin. The crunch. The smile you couldn't hide. That memory is still warm when you drift off to sleep. And that's the second reason why food sucked in medieval times. Even when you did get something good, it never stayed. It was gone before you could believe it was real. The frost came early that year. The morning grass was stiff, glittering under the pale sky. When you stepped outside, the air bit at your cheeks, and the wind slipped through every layer of cloth you wore. You pulled your shawl tighter and made your way to the village square, where the others were gathering near the stone well. People huddled close, their breath rising in soft clouds. Everyone looked thinner than before. A man from another village had arrived with a sack of dried fish. It was a rare thing, and everyone stared as he opened the bag. The smell was sharp and salty, a little rotten around the edges, but that didn't stop anyone. Salted fish meant protein, strength. A few coins changed hands. Some bartered with old cloth or bundles of firewood. You had nothing to trade, so you stood back and watched. Later, while helping your neighbor gather firewood near the forest edge, she offered you a strip of the fish. You held it in both hands like something sacred. It was leathery and hard to chew, but you didn't care. It tasted like the sea, like something far away from your little world of gray porridge and boiled roots at home. Your father was patching the roof. A storm had torn off part of it last week. He hadn't eaten yet. You gave him half the strip of fish, and he nodded without looking up. "Good," he said. That was all. Just good. But you knew what he meant. Your mother was boiling a pot of something again. You could tell by the way the smell clung to the walls. You didn't ask what was in it. Sometimes it was better not to know. The steam rising from the pot made the small room feel warmer, and you sat near it, holding your hands over the fire. A little later, the stew was ready. It was thin. Bits of cabbage, a slice of turnip, a sprinkle of barley. It didn't taste like much, but it made your body stop shaking. You watched the others eat slowly, chewing every bite, their spoons scraping the sides of the bowl. No one spoke. There wasn't anything to say. After dinner, you helped your sister wash the dishes in cold water from the well. Your hands turned red from the cold, but you didn't complain. She hummed an old song, something your grandmother used to sing. You remembered the tune, but not the words. The wind outside howled louder as the sky turned dark. A candle flickered on the table. You sat by it, mending a tear in your coat with a needle so thin it bent with each stitch. The fabric was rough, and your fingers slipped more than once, pricking the same spot again and again. The rhythm of sewing kept your mind from drifting too far into thoughts of food. That night, you dreamed of a table covered in bowls, bright green peas, golden bread with soft butter, honey in a small glass jar. You picked up a spoon and tasted warm milk with cinnamon. The taste made you cry in the dream. You didn't want to wake up, but morning came, as it always did. The candle had burned out. The fire had died. The cold had returned. Your joints ached as you got up, and your mouth felt dry. Outside, the sky was low and heavy. Everyone in the village spread out to look for things that could still be eaten. Mushrooms, if they hadn't frozen. Nuts, if the squirrels hadn't taken them. All wild onions, bitter greens. You searched along the edge of the woods, your eyes moving over the frozen ground, hoping to find something. A boy from another house found a patch of nettles. He called out, and a few of you hurried over. You picked them carefully with a cloth, knowing they would sting. But once boiled, the sting would go away. They tasted earthy and dark, but they were full of something your body needed. You gathered as much as you could, wrapping the bundle in your apron. Back home, your mother added the nettles to the pot. The color of the stew changed from pale gray to a dull green. The smell was stronger, this time most sharp. You were glad for it. Anything different was welcome. As you ate that evening, you realized something strange. You weren't full, not even close, but for the first time in days, you weren't sad while eating. Maybe it was the new flavor. Maybe it was the memory of laughing with the other children as you picked nettles in the snow. You didn't know, but it felt warm in a way. That had nothing to do with the fire. Afterward, your father told a story about a time when food was even scarcer and people had boiled their leather shoes just to soften them enough to chew. You couldn't tell if it was a joke or the truth, but you believed it. Then you went to bed. The room cold again, the wind still pressing against the walls. You pulled the blanket over your head and curled up tight, and just before sleep took you, you whispered the taste of that nettle stew into the dark. It wasn't good, but it was real, and that was enough. Asterisk, the next morning, your throat feels sore. The fire didn't last the night, and the cold air settled deep into your chest. You cough a little, holding your wool blanket tighter as the gray light of dawn peeks in through the shutters. Your breath curls in the cold room like smoke. You don't want to move. Your legs feel heavy, your hands stiff, but you know you can't. Stay in bed. You hear your mother's footsteps downstairs, quiet but constant. She never sleeps in. She's already near the hearth, coaxing yesterday's coals into a weak flame. You join her silently. She doesn't say anything, but she hands you a dry stick to feed the fire. You both watch it catch. Slowly, not enough to chase away the cold, but enough to make you move. There's no breakfast again. Just water from the pot, slightly warm and tasting of iron. You sip it slowly. The bread is gone. The stew pot is scraped clean. You chew on a piece of dried root your sister saved, but it does little more than remind your stomach it's empty. Still, you dress, pulling your tunic over your head, then your coat. The sleeves are too short now, but they'll do. Outside, the village is quiet. A few chickens scratch at the frozen earth. A cart creaks past, the driver hunched over under. A wool cloak, face hidden. Smoke curls up from one or two chimneys, but most fires haven't been lit yet. Firewood is precious now, too precious to waste unless absolutely needed. You walk to the stream at the edge of the woods. It hasn't frozen yet, but it will soon. You carry 2 buckets and fill them carefully. The water is icy and your fingers sting, but you don't let go. On the way back, you pass the old mill. Its wheel is frozen in place, the moss around it stiff like glass. You remember when it turned in the summer, grinding grain from the last harvest. That grain is long gone now. Back home, your brother is sewing holes in his boots. He's never been good at it, but he tries. You hand him a piece of cloth for padding. He nods without looking up. Everyone is quiet in winter. Words feel like extra weight. Your mother finds a handful of dried peas in a jar. She shakes them into a pot with water and sets it on the fire. It won't be much, but it's something. She adds salt from a cloth pouch, just a pinch. There isn't much left. You watch the peas swirl in the pot, rising and falling as the water begins to boil. Your sister brings a piece of stale bread from the neighbor. They traded for it. You don't ask what was given in return. The crust is hard as stone, but you soak it in the boiling pea water, making it soft enough to eat. The taste is plain, but it fills the space in your belly where the ache was. Later that day, the village bell rings once. You walk to the square with your brother. Everyone gathers slowly, bundled in whatever scraps of warmth they have. A message has arrived from the next village over. The roads are blocked by snow, and no supplies are coming through for the rest of the week. No one speaks, but the silence feels louder than any shouting. On the way back, you see a girl crying near the woodpile. She's younger than you, holding a broken bucket. Her family's water spilled into the snow. You kneel beside her and offer your scarf to wrap her hands. She sniffles and nods. Small acts of kindness are all anyone can afford now. At home, your mother ladles the pea soup into bowls, thin, pale, and not nearly enough. But she gives everyone the same portion, even herself. You eat slowly again, blowing on the hot liquid, and watching the steam rise in little curls. It smells like nothing, but it's warm. You drink it all, even the last drop. That night, you sit by the fire, mending your socks. The thread is rough, but it holds. You hum the tune your sister always sings, the one without words. She joins in from across the room. For a moment, it feels like a song. Then you lie in bed, the blanket pulled tight, listening to the wind press against the walls. You think about tomorrow. You think about food and how it's never quite enough. But still, you're here, still breathing, still hoping. Even when the meals are small, the days long, and the nights colder than you remember, something in you keeps going. You don't know what it is exactly, habit, maybe, or the memory of summer, or dreams of bread that doesn't hurt your teeth. And as you close your eyes, you think that's what it means to survive. The days grow shorter. It feels like you barely finish one before the next begins. Morning fades into night without warning, and the sun, when it appears at all, is weak and pale, more of a memory than a presence. The cold has settled deep into everything, the walls, the floor, your bones. It doesn't go away now. Even when you sit close to the fire, you wake before the sky brightens, if it brightens at all. The candle beside your bed has burned low. You sit up slowly, rubbing your hands together for warmth. Your fingers are stiff and your feet feel numb. You press them against the straw mattress, hoping for something, anything but the chill. Holds on tight. Your mother is already at the hearth, stirring something in the pot. The smell is faint. Barley again, you think. It's always barley when there's nothing else. She doesn't say anything as you sit beside her. You just listen to the soft bubbling, the creak of the spoon against the pot, and the occasional hiss of wood cracking in the fire. She pours you a small bowl. You take it with both hands, letting the heat soak into your skin before you take a sip. It tastes like wet stone with maybe a hint of salt. There's no meat, no herbs, no butter, but it's hot, and that matters. After breakfast, you go out to gather twigs for kindling. Every stick must be pulled from frozen soil or from dead roots half buried in snow. You carry them in a bundle tied with string. Your arms through the cloth, but you keep going. You pass the smithy on your way back. He's not working today. There's nothing to fix, and no one has iron to spare. His forge is cold. He sits outside on a wooden stool, staring into the distance, a blanket around his shoulders. You nod as you pass. He doesn't respond. People speak less now. Words take energy, and energy is too expensive. Back home, your sister is spinning wool. The wheel creaks softly, round and round. She's slow, careful, focused. Her fingers are red from the cold, but she keeps working. The yarn is rough, uneven, but it will be turned into something useful. Maybe mittens, or cloth for a new bonnet. Something warm, or at least warmer than nothing. You help your brother repair a fence behind the house. The wood is old and splintering, but it's enough to keep the goats from wandering. You feed her a handful of hay and hope she lasts the week. If she doesn't, there'll be one less mouth to feed, but also no milk in the spring. That evening, a neighbor comes by. She brings a gift, half a loaf of rye bread, baked with the last of her flour. It's cracked and dry, but you accept it like treasure. Your mother cuts it into thin slices, one for each person. You chew it slowly, letting the dryness soak into your tongue, trying to imagine it's fresh. Someone tells a story after dinner, something about a village far away where the rivers never freeze and the trees grow fruit even in winter. It sounds like a fairy tale, but you listen anyway because imagining warmth is better than feeling cold later that night. As the fire dies down, you sit by the small window and watch snow begin to fall. At first, just a few flakes, then more. Soft, silent, covering everything. In a white blanket that looks beautiful, even though you know it means another hard morning. Snow is heavy. It hides what you need. It slows your feet. It makes gathering water from the stream even worse. You crawl into bed, pulling the covers up to your chin. Your breath floats in the air above you like smoke. Stare at the wall, listening to the wind brushing past the house. And still, there is that hunger. Not sharp anymore, but dull. Always there. You've gotten used to it. Everyone has taught you think about summer, about green fields and buzzing bees and bread that didn't break your teeth. You try to remember the taste of roasted meat, sweet apples, warm milk. The memories feel soft, like a worn-out dream, fading at the edges. But you hold on to them anyway, because someday, maybe, not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but someday the frost will melt, and something green will grow again. You believe that you have to. Asterisk, the snow didn't stop. By morning, the world was buried. It came down all night without a sound, turning the roads to shadows and the rooftops into soft white mounds. When you looked out the window, everything had vanished under the weight of it. The fences, the cart Even the paths where people used to walk. Only the tops of trees stood above the smooth white hills, their branches heavy with frost. You dressed slowly. Every movement felt like effort. The sleeves of your coat were still damp from the day before. Your boots hadn't dried properly either. But you put them on anyway, because you had to fetch water again. Snow was falling still, soft and steady, brushing your face as you stepped outside. The air was silent in that strange way only snow brings thick, hushed, like the whole world was holding its breath. You trudged toward the stream with your buckets. The snow reached up past your knees in places, and it pulled at your legs with every step. Each footprint vanished behind you in minutes. The stream was half frozen now, covered in a thin sheet of ice that cracked under your boot when you reached the edge. You broke it with a stick, dipped your buckets, and filled them one slow scoop at a time. Back home, your fingers burned from the cold. You held them near the fire until the feeling came back. Your mother was heating the last of the potatoes. They were small, soft, and wrinkled, kept in a sack under the floorboards since autumn. Now there were only a few left. She peeled them carefully, not wasting even the thin skins. When the pot was ready, she added the peels too, and a bit of the barley to make a thin soup. It didn't taste like much, but it was hot. You and your siblings ate slowly, again, not speaking, holding the bowls close to your mouths to catch every drop of steam. Afterward, you helped your sister brush snow from the roof. Too much weight, your father said, and the whole thing might collapse. So you climbed the ladder with her, using flat boards to push the snow away. Your hands went numb quickly, even through your mittens, but you didn't stop. The sound of snow sliding off the roof filled the air like the hush of waves. Later, you heard a knock at the door. Your neighbor, Mr. Ewan, stood outside with his daughter. He looked tired, thinner than you remembered. They were offering a small sack of lentils, asking in return for firewood. Your mother hesitated, but she agreed. Wood was precious, but so was food. You handed over the bundle of sticks you'd collected earlier, and they thanked you with quiet eyes. That night, your mother added the lentils to the pot. The soup thickened just a little. The smell was earthy and warm, and for the first time in days, you felt something like comfort. You held your bowl with both hands, watching the steam rise, and breathed it in before even taking a sip. The lentils were soft. They tasted like nothing and everything at once. The kind of taste that stayed on your tongue, not because it was strong, but because it was rare. You didn't smile, not exactly, but you looked at your mother, and she looked at you. And that was enough. After the meal, your sister took out her sewing basket and mended a tear in your scarf. She didn't say much, just hummed under her breath. The thread was a strange color, but it held. You thanked her and wrapped it around your neck before heading to bed. The snow was still falling. You lay under your blanket, knees tucked up to your chest, listening to the faint creak of the roof. Above, your breath made small clouds in the dark. You watched them drift up and fade, and you thought again about food. Not just the eating of it, but the thinking of it, how it filled your dreams, your stories, even your quiet moments. You remembered how your grandmother used to talk about feast days, fresh bread, meat pies, spiced puddings. It sounded like another world, a world you weren't sure had ever really existed, but maybe it had. Maybe it would again. The hunger didn't leave you. It never did. But there was something else now. A feeling that tomorrow or the next day might bring something different. Even if it was just another neighbor with another sack of lentils. Because survival wasn't just about food. It was about patience, about keeping close, about giving when you could, and hoping someone would give back. You closed your eyes with that thought still warm in your mind, and the snow kept falling. The snow stopped some time before dawn. When you opened your eyes, the room was quiet, but brighter than usual. A soft light poured in through the cracks in the shutters. Not the cold, gray light you were used to, but something cleaner, softer. The kind of light that comes after a long storm. You got up slowly. Your legs ached. Your hands were stiff. But the cold didn't feel quite as sharp. You wrapped your scarf tighter and stepped outside. The village was still. Snow blanketed every rooftop, every road, every fence and tree. But there were tracks now. Little paths pressed into the white, from boots, from carts, from people moving. Again, smoke drifted from more chimneys than before. You could hear voices in the distance, and the air smelled different. Not warm, exactly, but not hopeless either. You walked to the square. A few others were gathered near the well, speaking quietly. The road to the next village had been cleared. Someone said, "Supplies might come soon." Someone else said they saw birds this morning, real ones, fluttering near the edge of the woods. You didn't say anything, just listened. At home, your mother was kneeling by the hearth. She looked up as you entered, her hands covered in ash. She was smiling, just a little. On the table beside her sat something you hadn't seen in weeks, a small cloth bundle tied with string. Inside, 2 onions, a handful of oats, and 3 eggs. Your brother had walked to the next village, traded an old wool cloak for food. He hadn't told anyone. He just went and came back before first light. Your mother added the oats and chopped onions into the pot. The eggs she saved, maybe for tomorrow, maybe for something special. As it cooked, the scent filled the room, savory, soft, almost sweet. You sat near the fire, watching the pot bubble. Your stomach tightened with the smell. You weren't full yet, not even close, but the warmth inside you was growing. When the soup was ready, your mother gave you a bowl. The steam curled up around your face. The onions softened into strings. The oats thickened the broth. You took a spoonful and closed your eyes. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a feast. But it was more than survival. It was something close to peace. Later, your sister came in with a bundle of twigs wrapped in her shawl. "The sun is out," she said, surprised. I saw it. You all stepped outside again, blinking at the brightness. The snow glittered like glass. The sky was pale blue. For the first time in weeks, you could feel the warmth of light on your skin, faint but real. The goats stirred. One of them stood. Again, slow and wobbly. She blinked at the sun like it was a dream. You helped your brother repair the shed. You smiled when the handle of the hammer didn't bite your fingers with cold. You laughed, a small laugh, but a real one, when your sister nearly slipped on the snow and caught herself by grabbing your arm. That night, you sat by the fire without shivering. Your mother unwrapped the eggs from their cloth. She cracked one into a small pan and stirred it with a spoon, adding a pinch of salt. Just one egg, split between 5 of you. But it was golden and soft and tasted like something from a storybook. You all sat close. No one said much, but the room felt full in a way it hadn't for a long time. Later, in bed, you pulled the blanket up and rested your hands on your chest. The wind outside had calmed. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, just quiet, just still. And as you drifted off, you thought of how far you'd come, of all the days that blurred together, the endless cold, the thin soups, the hunger that never truly left, but somehow you had made it through. You had learned that why food sucked in medieval times wasn't just about bad taste or strange ingredients. It was about the weight of winter, the silence of empty bowls, the way a single onion could make your hands shake with joy. It was about waiting, about hoping, about surviving one more day. You didn't know what spring would bring. Maybe more. Storms, maybe less. But you would be there to see it. Still breathing, still hoping. still here. She stepped outside again that morning, her shoes already wet from the snow left behind days ago. The sun had risen, but barely. It was only a pale smudge in the sky, hidden behind thick clouds. The wind was quiet now, but the cold hadn't left. It clung to the stones, to the fences, to her fingertips. Her breath came out in faint puffs, soft white clouds that vanished before they reached the gate. The road outside the cottage was more mud than ice today. A good sign, maybe. Or maybe just another kind of trouble. The mud could trap a cartwheel or ruin a pair of shoes. But no one had carts here anymore. No one had horses. If you needed something, you carried it yourself. She had the same basket over her arm, the one with the broken handle and frayed cloth. It had once been used for bread, long ago when her grandmother was alive, and bread was a thing you made. At home, not something you begged for, but today it held a small lump of dried beans wrapped in a rag. She was headed to old Farna's cottage at the edge of the woods, hoping maybe they could trade. The walk was long, and the wind picked up again. She tightened the scarf around her neck. Her hands were cold, even inside her sleeves. The same crooked fences, the same bent trees, the same dog that barked without ever getting up. When she reached Farna's door, she knocked gently. Once, twice, then stepped back. The door opened slowly. Farna looked older than ever. Her hands were stained from dyeing cloth, and her hair was tucked under a worn bonnet. But she smiled a little when she saw the girl. "You've come for lentils, haven't you?" Farna said softly. The girl nodded. "If you have any." Farna looked inside her own basket. Then, over her shoulder, "I've got some left. Not many. What have you brought?" The girl held out her cloth. "Dried beans. A few." Farna nodded slowly, eyes kind but cautious. "Fair enough." Inside, the cottage was warmer. A small fire burned in the hearth. The room smelled of cabbage and smoke. Not pleasant, but not awful either. A cat watched them from under a table. The girl stood quietly, hands folded in front of her. "You know," Farna said, after a long pause, "this time of year was always hard, even when we had more. My mother used to say February was the month the cupboards cry. I didn't understand what she meant until I grew up." The girl looked at the fire, at the pot hanging above it. Something was boiling, slowly, probably water with herbs. Maybe not much at all. Farna handed her a small pouch of lentils wrapped in wax cloth. "Don't boil them too long," she warned. "They go to mush. Better to soak 'em first if you can." The girl thanked her and left, stepping back into the cold. As she walked home, the clouds began to split apart. A little light peeked through, pale but golden. It didn't warm her hands, but it made the path shimmer. For a moment, it looked like the world had been dusted with something soft, not snow, not frost, something kinder. When she reached the cottage, her brother was by the fire, rubbing his hands together. "Did you get anything?" he asked quietly. She nodded, holding up the pouch. His eyes lit up a little. Not much, but enough to show he was still hoping. "I'll fetch water, then," he said. She went to the kitchen, such as it was. The pots hung on nails driven into the wall. The table wobbled slightly when she pressed her hand to it. She measured out the lentils slowly. It wasn't much, but it would be something, something hot, something they could eat with their hands around the bowls, letting the steam rise to their faces. Her mother came in then, rubbing her arms. "The wind's back," she said, whistling through every crack in the house. The girl nodded and began filling the pot with water. The fire needed stoking, so she fed it a few sticks, each one dry and snapping. It caught quickly. The sound of boiling water would come soon. Later that night, they all sat quietly around the small table. The food was nothing special, just lentils and salt and a bit of dried garlic, but it was warm, and it filled their bellies just enough to sleep. Outside, the wind howled again. It beat softly at the shutters, but inside all was still. The girl lay down in her blanket. She stared at the ceiling beams, thinking about Farna's words. February is when the cupboards cry. She thought they'd been crying for a long time now. But somehow, even with all the sorrow, the world still moved. The wind still blew. The snow still melted. The sun still rose. And that's why food sucked in medieval times. Not just because it tasted bad, or was hard to get, or cold, or bland, but because it came wrapped in waiting, walking, silence, trade, frost, fear, and luck. It was never just food. 'Twas everything. She turned over, pulling the blanket tight, and let herself drift into sleep. Morning came with a pale sky and a brittle chill in the air. The kind of cold that didn't bite sharply, but crept in slow under sleeves, into boots, behind the neck. The girl woke before the others. The fire had died sometime during the night, leaving only a small heap of gray ash and a few orange coals curled in the center. She didn't get up at first. She just lay still beneath the blanket, watching her breath rise in soft clouds. The room was hushed. Not even the crows were calling yet. Somewhere outside, a cart rolled by on the frozen road, the wooden wheels creaking in the silence. She finally stood and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. Her feet were cold against the stone floor. The room smelled of old smoke and boiled lentils. Her stomach didn't ache the way it sometimes did last night's food, though thin had helped, but it was still empty in that quiet, hollow way. She went to the hearth and stirred the ashes. A few sparks jumped. She added a stick, then another. Slowly, the orange glow returned. She sat by the fire for a while, just warming her hands. It wasn't much, but it helped. Her mother came in next, eyes heavy from sleep. She nodded a soft, "Good morning," then moved to the corner where the water jug stood. She lifted it, checked the weight, and gave a small sigh. "We'll need more by midday," she said, "before the well freezes again." The girl nodded. "I can go." Her mother looked at her with tired affection. "You always do." They shared a smile small, almost sad but real. Later, as the sun crept higher, she wrapped her scarf again and stepped out, bucket in hand. The walk to the well wasn't far, but it was slippery. Her boots slid on patches of packed snow. She passed a neighbor carrying sticks, another chopping ice near a fence. Everyone looked tired. When she reached the well, 2 other girls were already there, talking softly, their voices low and slow, like the sky. One of them, Clara, nodded in greeting. The other, Meg, smiled faintly. "It's thin today," Clara said, lowering her rope. "Freezing around the edge already." "Mine stuck. Yesterday," Meg added, "had to dip twice." The girl just nodded and waited her turn. The wind whistled past them, pulling at their scarves. A crow landed on the stone wall nearby and watched them. When it was her turn, she leaned over the edge and dropped the bucket. It splashed, a hollow sound, a key. Pulled it up slowly, hand over hand, her fingers red with cold. Back home, Kikyu, she poured the water into the jug and set it near the fire to warm slightly. Her brother had found a few carrots at the bottom of the root bin. They were shriveled, but still good enough for boiling. That day, they made a thin carrot broth. Just water, carrot, salt, and a little of the lentils left from yesterday. No one said much while it cooked. They just waited, watching the fire, listening to the crackling, smelling the faint scent of food that never quite felt like enough. They didn't eat until evening. That was the rule. You didn't cook twice. You didn't waste wood. The girl sat with her family as they passed the bowl around. Each took a few spoonfuls. Her brother didn't complain. Her mother closed her eyes while she chewed, like it helped. Her pretend the broth was thicker than it was. The girl looked at her hands. They were rough now, like her mother's. The skin near her thumbs had cracked again. She would wrap them later with cloth dot. As they ate, someone knocked softly on the door. They all looked at one another. No one came at this hour unless something was wrong. Her mother stood and opened it. It was a boy from down the lane. He looked half frozen, his nose red and his breath quick. "My sister," he said. "She's sick." My mother asked, "Do you have any broth? Even just a cup?" The girl saw her mother glance at the pot, then at them. She didn't speak for a moment. Then she nodded. Of course. She poured a little into a jar and wrapped it in cloth to keep warm. The boy took it with shaking hands. "Thank you," he said, and ran off into the dark. They didn't speak for a while after that. Later, as the girl lay under her blanket, she watched the shadows shift across the ceiling again. The wind had returned, whispering under the door. She thought about the boy, about his sister, about how many people were still cold, still hungry, still waiting for something to change. This was why food sucked in medieval times. Not only because it was plain or thin, but because it had to stretch too far, feed too many, warm too little. It wasn't food, was a promise you kept breaking every day. She closed her eyes and let the sound of the fire lull her toward sleep. Tomorrow would begin again. Morning came slowly, as if the sky itself was tired. The girl opened her eyes and listened. First, no voices, no wind, no footsteps. Her blanket was pulled tight around her shoulders, and she felt the familiar stiffness in her arms from sleeping curled up. Her mother was already awake, sitting near the hearth with her hands around a cup. The fire was low, but still burning. "You slept late," her mother said without looking. "Back, just a little," the girl whispered. They didn't always talk much in the mornings. There wasn't anything new to say, but today felt quiet in a different way. The house seemed heavier. Her brother hadn't stirred. His blanket was pulled high over his head. The girl sat up and stretched her legs. Her stomach felt hollow again. That wasn't new. She stood and walked to the small shelf where the food was kept. A half onion, a few oats, some dried greens. She turned each one over in her hands, thinking. Behind her, her mother said, "Use the onion for dinner. Save the oats for tomorrow. It might snow." The girl nodded. Outside, the light was gray and flat. No clouds, no sun, just an empty stretch of sky. She stepped out with the empty water jug and made her way toward the well again. Her boots crunched against the old snow. It didn't melt anymore, just shifted around in patches white, then brown, then gray. As she walked, she passed the cottage where the sick girl lived. The curtains were closed. No smoke came from the chimney. She didn't stop. She didn't look too long. But she carried the silence with her all the way to the well. No one else was there today. Just her, the wind, and the sound of the bucket creaking down into the dark. When she pulled it up, the water was clearer than usual, cold and sharp. She filled her jug and walked back slowly. Her hands stung by the time she reached the door. She rubbed them together as she stepped inside. Her brother was awake now, sitting on the floor with his knees tucked up to his chest. "Any news?" he asked. She shook her head. Their mother stirred the fire and dropped in a few more sticks. Later, they made soup again, thinner than before. The onion gave it flavor, at least. They didn't speak while they ate. They just held their bowls and chewed slowly, letting the heat fill their mouths, their hands, their chests. That night, the wind came back stronger. It howled under the roof and through the cracks in the walls. The girl lay on her straw mat and pulled the blanket over her head. The cold always found a way in, even when you didn't move. She thought again of the girl behind the closed curtains. She thought of the boy who had come to their door. She thought of Farna, of the lentils, of the days that felt the same and never changed. And she thought again about why food, sucked in medieval times, it wasn't just that there wasn't enough. It was the way it wrapped itself around everything else. Around fear, around silence, around grief, around what you had to give up. Sometimes food meant not eating so someone else could. Sometimes it meant trading the only thing you had for a handful of nothing. Sometimes it meant guilt even when your stomach was warm. She pulled the blanket tighter. The fire had burned low again. Her mother rose to add a few more sticks, moving quietly in the dark. Tomorrow they would look for wild garlic, she said. If the ground was soft enough to dig. The girl nodded from under the blanket. Even though her mother couldn't see Dot, she was tired, not from walking, not from cold, just tired in the kind of way that settles deep and quiet, like snow that never melts. Dot, and outside, the wind kept moving through the village, over rooftops, through broken fences, across fields still frozen from the night before. Asterisk, the next morning came with silence again. No wind, no birds, no footsteps on the road. Only the soft sound of the fire still breathing in the hearth. She opened her eyes slowly. Her blanket was heavy with cold, but she didn't mind it now. She had grown used to the weight. Another layer of the season, just something to carry. Her mother was already dressed, wrapping cloth around her shoes. "Come on," she said gently. "If we go now, we'll be back before the frost comes again." The girl nodded and sat up. Her fingers were stiff, but she rubbed them warm. She pulled her shawl close and followed her mother outside. They walked together across the narrow field behind the cottage. The ground was hard, but not frozen. The sun was trying its best, peeking through the clouds in soft gold streaks. It didn't warm their skin, but it lit the path ahead. They were going to the place where wild garlic sometimes grew, near the edge of the woods, where the soil stayed soft from the tree roots and the fallen leaves. If they were lucky, they'd find a few green shoots to bring back. It wasn't much, but it would make the soup taste like something again. The girl looked around as they walked. Broken fences, bare trees, smoke rising thinly from chimneys. The world looked the same every day now, but still she walked. Still they searched. They reached the woods. Her mother knelt first, pulling aside some dead branches, brushing away the cold topsoil. The girl did the same, her fingers cold, but steady. They moved quietly, carefully, searching for something green in a world full of gray. After a while, her mother said, "Here." She held up a few sprigs of garlic, still covered in dirt. The girl smiled a little. "It's enough." They found a few more, not many, but enough to carry home in the pouch sewn into her mother's apron. It felt like treasure. Not gold, not silver, just food. But in days like these, food was the only treasure that mattered. As they walked back, the girl thought about the days before, about the boys breaking ice at the stream, about Farna's quiet kitchen, about the boy who came to their door, about soup made of nothing but memory. She looked at her mother. Her hands were red from digging, her steps slow but steady, and she thought of how every bowl of soup came from effort like this, from walking, bending, waiting, hoping. When they got home, the fire had gone out again. Her brother was still asleep, curled up like a small animal near the wall. They lit the fire slowly, carefully. Her mother used the last bit of straw they had saved just for that. When the flames caught, the girl placed the small pot on the hook and poured in water. She didn't rush. She didn't speak. She peeled the garlic with her fingernails and dropped it in. The room smelled better almost right away. Not strong, but warm. Familiar. They didn't eat until later that evening. The broth was thin, still, but the garlic made it feel like more. Her brother smiled after his first sip. Her mother closed her eyes and just breathed in the steam. The girl sat there quietly, holding the bowl between her hands, feeling the heat sink into her fingers. And she thought, this is why food sucked in medieval times, because it was never just food. It was always work, always waiting, always hunger behind the eyes. It tasted of sacrifice, of mud, of distance. You didn't just chew it, you earned it. You walked for it. You gave part of yourself for every bite. But still, they kept going, even when there was barely anything to eat, even when it snowed again, even when the cupboards cried, because that's what people did. The fire popped. Brother laughed at something. Her mother reached for more broth, and the girl, for the first time in many days, felt just a little warm. And that was a small window into the long, slow days of a world where food was not a comfort, but a quiet struggle. If you're still with me, thank you for listening. Thank you for resting here. Maybe you're already half asleep now. Eyes heavy, breaths soft and steady. Before you drift all the way off, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it there? Leave a comment below. I really do read them. It's always incredible to see how far these quiet stories travel, and if this helped you relax, or even made you feel a little less alone in the night. You can support the channel just by tapping subscribe. That way, more calm history will be waiting for you next time. Sleep is hard to find. Until then, stay warm, stay soft, and sleep well. Good night.